Hello and welcome back to another episode of Slimming Stories. I'm your host, Claire Oldham-West. Welcome back everyone. It's September. My goodness, the time has literally just flown by. August was a lovely month, a time to catch up with some friends and family and not have to think about doing the podcast or being on social media, just take a step back. But I've also been working towards my new business for my hypnotherapy and coaching practice, and I've literally, within the last week, I've literally found an office to rent, so I've been also looking at that new contract. The opportunity came up and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go for it, secure this space, and then I'm going to be able to really focus. And when you're at home working, anybody that's working from home will know that when you've got a busy household with people coming and going, we know with children still at school, it can be quite distracting. So this is going to be my space to just write, create, do posts, and this will also be an ideal space to do my Zoom calls with my hypnotherapy and coaching clients, because it'll be really quiet. It's definitely a change and it just feels like everything's coming together. And it's only 2 years. I'm nearly going to be hitting my 2-year anniversary, so next month, nearly 2 years of the podcast, and we're soon to hit 50,000 individual downloads, so that's so exciting. And yeah, I'm stepping up and I'm just carving out this space for me to be able to do exactly what I need to do when I need to do it, without any restrictions, without any dishes calling to be washed from the kitchen, or without having to be on demand to cook meals. It will literally be my own space. I'm so excited, and I've been doodling. I've been doing lots of arty things over summer. And I'm looking at creating some affirmation cards. So this is kind of just a start of getting some colours down on paper, seeing what I think looks good. And it's also a great thing to do if you're somebody that's really focused on the weight loss and fitness. Rather than like reaching out for whatever's in the cupboard, taking up a hobby, whether that's, like knitting or crocheting or something crafty, whatever you're busy with your hands, you're not having to feed your face with food. So it's a great thing to do. And I'm not really one for watching like loads of TV. So for me, just, doodling, getting some nice watercolours together, something that's not too messy. I'm not sitting there with my oils and stuff, going on Procreate and things like that. Just having some time just to be creative. And I've had a really nice summer, but I'm so pleased to be back. And I've got some great guests that are booked in for interviews. And I've also been recording some new guests just this week. So we've got the last quarter of the year, and it's autumn. And I just love, autumn, the autumnal colours and that coziness and just getting ready for Christmas. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've had a great time this summer. So today's episode is a republished episode of Steve Lodge, and it's a great episode. It touches on everything, a bit about weight loss and then fitness and mental health. It's all in there. And I know that you'll be inspired, and just take something from this episode and see how you can apply this to your journey and where you're at this moment. I know a lot of guests listen to the episodes in the gym, and I really think that this will just help and motivate you through the last quarter of the year. I mean, I still can't believe how fast this year has gone, or is it just me? It just seems to have really gone so fast, and we definitely need some inspiration just to keep us ticking along. So here's introducing Steve Lodge to his episode of Slimming Story. Enjoy.
There's nothing out there that we as humans aren't capable of doing. It's just having a little bit of belief in ourselves that we can actually do it. Yeah. And that took me a long time to get to that point where, I believed that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And that's where I'm at with kind of the accepting of where I am now with my fitness and my body shape and everything else. I can achieve anything I want. If I set my mind to doing something, I know that I'll either do my best to accomplish it or I will absolutely smash it. And that's where I'm at, rather than having any negativity about it, the fact that I'm not going to be able to do this. I think mentally rather than physically, the change is huge. And it's finding that point. I think everybody gets that point where, the mental side of things takes over. You know what? I can achieve this now. This is the goal I've set myself, and I'm going to achieve it.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Slimming Stories. I'm your host, Claire Oldham West. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all ready for the shops tomorrow. And I'm not going to get too political. All that I would say is just, apply common sense. Just because the government say you need to be doing X, Y and Z doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be doing that and following the leader. And we'll just leave it there, shall we? We'll just leave it there. Today's guest is a lovely guy, a lovely, inspirational guy that has been really honest about sharing his story with slimming and with his mental health. I just want to give a bit of a trigger warning that we do go into depth regarding mental health and we do touch on suicidal thoughts. So if that's something that hits home a little too much, maybe you're around somebody who's going through those same struggles and you're not really in a place to receive this, then I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. But what I do want to say is Steve has been so brave and so honest and open in taking time to spend with me to record this podcast interview. It really, really is. And for anybody that is open, and especially a guy, just to sit there and go into depth regarding how his mental health has been and also the journey out of those really dark times. Steve has lost an amazing amount of weight with Slimming World, and he's actually a consultant too. So there's just so much goodness in this episode. I can't begin to tell you. I really can't begin to tell you. And I'm not going to say any more. I'm not going to give you any spoiler alerts. But what I would say is that this weekend, Steve, along with his friends from Slimming World, have attempted to do many steps. It was supposed to be part of a climb up Snowdon. If you remember Amy's episode, she's also a Slimming World consultant that's looking to take part. But because of lockdown, they've done like a virtual Snowdon step climb. I'm not sure what it's actually called. That sounds rubbish. I should really record that, but I'm not going to do. That's what they did. So they did the steps, they raised money, and I've seen from his Instagram account that they've raised a lot of money, which is fantastic. If you would like to support Steve in his efforts with taking those steps and raising awareness for Mind, you can find Steve's Instagram account at Steve_achieve, and there's links on there and you'll be able to see how you can contribute to this fantastic charity and organisation that I've had lots of dealings with. I used to do referrals for counselling and for people that was waiting to see a psychiatrist at hospital. And what always amazed me when I started to work with clients there was the length of time that it had taken for these people to actually receive professional help. And that is really, it's really something, isn't it? Just to consider that, if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't sit there and wait for a phone call. You wouldn't sit there and wait for a letter, would you? You get the help. And there's still a big gap between physical help and the help that you receive when you're struggling mentally. And I know it's difficult to talk about feelings, and that sometimes, often when we are struggling, we just try to internalise that. But as Steve explains, it's really, really important just to speak to somebody, speak to a friend, a colleague, a neighbour. If you don't have those people to hand, if you don't have that support system, then contact Mind and just have that conversation. Mind also do drop-in centres. So if you're in a situation where you know that there'll be a waiting list, you can go into one of their drop-in centres and also a GP surgery. So if this finds you where you really relate to what Steve has to say today, then I would urge you to just not internalise it anymore, to think, right, okay, Monday's a new day tomorrow and I'm going to go to my GP, I'm going to make contact, I'm going to seek the help, and I'm going to put steps in place to try and get the support that you really need, because mental health is huge. It's huge, and it's an illness. And what I would say is just please give yourself the kindness to know that you matter. You matter, your health matters, and just to get the support that you really do need. So here's over to Steve, and I do again just want to thank him just for being so lovely and open with his words that I know will encourage lots of people. And with his weight loss, 11 stone, 11.5 pounds. What an amazing achievement. Here we go. You just want to start by telling us what your weight started at when you decided to make a change?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started, I was 25 stone, 11 and a half pounds.
I imagine that to be at that weight, that it took a while to get there, and there were some habits that you'd grown accustomed to. So what happened to make you want to change?
Basically, so I had a massive health scare. I was at work one day. I used to be a bingo club manager, and obviously long hours, long days. So basically, I started work that morning at 10 o'clock. I was working until 11 o'clock at night. During the afternoon, at some point, I started getting chest pains. Thought nothing of it, thought it was just my kind of greedy behaviour that I'd eaten too much at lunchtime and it gave me a bit of indigestion. And then as the evening progressed, I had this shooting pain that I'd never experienced before, it was called, and it was a big heart scare. So, yeah.
Goodness. So, I mean, I've never had any problems with my heart, and luckily the family has not really had any issues that have meant they've had any heart scares or any strokes. So I'd imagine that, you've gone to work to do your normal day's duty to get on board and to call those numbers out, and then this happens. So how did that feel in that moment?
It was really, really surreal, to be honest with you, because obviously it's not what you expect to happen. It's getting to that weight is something that's come along over years of abusing your body, basically, of kind of having the wrong things go in. So you feel kind of invincible, I suppose, the fact that, yeah, this is it, this is my life, I'm plodding along happily as one, and then all of a sudden, bang, it happens, and it's just petrifying. Petrifying is probably the best word I could put out there for it. Yeah, absolutely.
From the point of being at work to having this scare, did you have to go by ambulance, or did you take yourself off to the doctors? What happened next?
Yeah, so basically, as I said, I was at work. Went back down to the office where I did my main work from. The paramedics were called, the other assistant managers that I had there on site with me. They called the paramedics. They came into the work, into the office, and I was there, my shirt open, and they attached me to an ECG machine. Attached this ECG machine, anomalies all over the place, and they said, okay, so we'll keep on monitoring, but we're going to take you down to the hospital. Got me into the ambulance, and then when I got into the ambulance, I think this is when it hit home, because the sirens started going and the lights were flashing. So I thought, okay, this isn't kind of any normal kind of checkup. They need to get me there as quickly as possible. So that was kind of that process of, in my own head, kind of finding out where I was and how I felt, and and that's where I was so petrified to what was going to happen next. Yeah.
Goodness. And having this extra weight, is this a conversation that you had with a doctor at the time of this incident and when everything had calmed down? What happened from leaving work to point where you knew that you needed to make a change because the information that you was hearing was not great?
So basically, I got down to the hospital, was still attached to the ECG machine as I was kind of put onto the ward that they put me on. And again, within an hour, maybe hour and a half, everything just went back to normal, as if nothing had ever happened. My heart rate was fine, but the rhythm was fine, everything was absolutely fine, as if nothing had happened. Next day, I seen the specialist. The specialist came to see me, and we spoke about the weight that was at. And said, look, you need to do something now. You need to change your life. You need to change your ways. You need to do it now, or the next time this will be the real thing, and it could end you. So that was it. And I think the biggest realization hit that I had was as I was walking out the door. He said, Mr. Lodge, and I turned around and went, I hope that I never see you again. And that was kind of okay. That's the moment where I was like, okay, I've got to really plod on and do something now.
And we hear, don't we, that it takes a lot for some people just to kind of, I don't know if it's a case of people walk along and just accept their larger bodies, with no disrespect, obviously you was morbidly obese, but something seems to trigger the guests that I've had on so far to do something, and it seems to be quite a harsh trigger that something's happened, and then that's been the turning point. So with those words said to you from your consultant, did you feel like motivated? Did you feel like something had clicked, something had happened, like a change within you that you knew that something must happen next?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just going back a point. I mean, going back to you say about going around my everyday life, being in the size I was extremely happy with me. I was very comfortable with me and how I felt with everything. I was My life was great. I had a decent job. I had a nice house. You know, I was in a stable marriage. Everything was brilliant. And my life was as it should be. The only problem was I was far too greedy. And that's where the kind of the weight spiraled out of control. Moving on to the next step, it was that realization, I think, that when he said those words to me, that, you know, I do need to do something, but because I'd always been the big lad. I'd always been big growing up, through my teens, 20s, you know, not to the point where I was morbidly obese, but to the point where I was the biggest lad in a kind of a bunch of friends that we had.
Yeah.
So I'd always been big. So I'd never kind of dieted. I'd never exercised really. I'd done a little bits and played kind of football with mates and stuff like that, but nothing really kind of to the point where I was looking after my health and making sure that I was losing weight and staying to a weight I should be. So it was kind of, I was a bit lost and I did not have a clue where I was going to turn to, what I was going to do. All I knew was walking out of that room that I had to do something. So that was the turning point. That
was a turning point, right. And was Slimming World the first thing that came to mind, or did you try anything before that? Did you try any of the shakes, any of the quick fixes that we hear about?
Yeah, so like I said, I wasn't aware of what was out there in terms of what I could use to do as well. Obviously, I'd heard of kind of the bigger companies like Weight Watchers, Slimming World. I'd heard of calorie counting. I'd heard of them, but I'd never looked into how they worked or anything like that. So I came out of that hospital that day, and it was just kind of a case of Google searching what's the best for me, what I'm going to get from it, you know, what's around the location I was living in, speaking to friends that I'd known that had lost weight on certain diets, and just finding out what was going to be best for me, really, to make the best possible choice.
And at that point, did Slimming World come up?
Yeah, Slimming World and Weight Watchers came up. So I went and found a Slimming World group because it was the closest one to me, and it was a time and a day that suited the lifestyle that I had and my job and everything like that. The first day I remember vividly in my head, and I'm sure that everybody listening to this has kind of been through this at some point. I walked through those doors for the first time, had a looked around the room, did a 360 and turned straight around and went home again. Because I was like, as soon as I walked into the room, it was like, this is not for me. I'm not going to kind of, and I suppose I had this kind of, I don't want to open my soul to people that I don't know.
Yeah.
But not having experienced that before, I didn't know kind of what to expect. So it was that initial reaction of, this is not for me. Definitely, yeah, when I first walked in. And I think it was at least another week had gone by before I even thought of trying it again and going kind of back to the group. So what I did was I went back onto the Slimming World website and I did a search for clubs also in the area. But then it said search a little bit further away. So I thought, nobody's going to know me. I'm not going to know anybody within that room. I'm not going to know the person running it. I'm not going to know anything about that. So I found a group that was probably about a good 15, 20-minute drive away from where I lived. And I went to that group the same morning as the other one that I turned around and walked out of. I walked into the group and I was about to do exactly the same thing I did the previous week. Let's turn around and walk back out again. But the consultant of that group was actually waiting at the doors, welcoming people into the group. So as I walked in, it was kind of, I was grabbed and dragged to a seat and sat down. So I was like, okay, I'm here now. I might as well listen to what they've got to say.
No getting away this time.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they cornered me.
They cornered you, yeah. So your first session, having been weighed, and obviously you get the paperwork, don't you, to read upon.
Yeah.
What was your first week like in terms of how you felt satisfied with your food? Did you feel a bit overwhelmed with everything? Did you feel a bit lost and you didn't really know what to do, or did it come natural?
So I'm one of these people that like to prove people wrong, and that's just kind of a mental attitude that I've got to kind of think this is not going to work. So basically, from the very first group that went in, I listened to the new members talk that I was given, sat through the group, and I had it in my head, this is not going to work. This is not for me. It won't work. But I'm going to give it a full week of where I follow it to the letter. I don't deviate from it one little bit, and I follow it perfectly. And then I'll show them next week when I come in and get weighed that, you know what, it doesn't work for me and I'll find something else to do. So that was my first week. And I did, and I followed it to the letter to how it's supposed to do, with how the Slim World Plan works. Followed it perfectly for the first week, and it was great, and to kind of start cooking again rather than going to a takeaway or, having some vegetables in my life was kind of a unique experience, which was kind of good. Loads of fruit, and it was just kind of, I suppose, the essentials that you have when you're following a weight loss plan. So that was my first week.
And what made you think that you could prove them wrong? What was it about this plan that you'd listen? Obviously, you'd attended class, you'd listened to the talk. At what point did you think, actually, I can prove them wrong? What part of the plan made you feel that it wasn't going to work?
I think it was the way that it was sold in that you can eat all of this food and still lose weight. But what I didn't understand then was kind of how the food groups work, with the amount of calories we're intaking into our bodies and stuff like that to help us get the weight loss. And I did not understand that. And so I was there thinking, there's no way I can eat all that food. You're telling me I can eat everything on this plan and I'll still lose weight. So I was very, very skeptical about how it worked. And that's why I was like, I was very kind of doubtful that it was going to work for me. So, and that's why I had that, I will prove you wrong kind of attitude to it.
Right. I haven't stepped on the scales. I haven't had your first week. How was that for you? Was it a big change? Did it surprise you?
Huge, yeah, massive. I mean, I lost 12.5 pounds in my first week.
Oh my goodness.
Great, yeah. So it was kind of okay. Backtrack a little bit. This might work. So it was a massive shock. So to stand on those scales and see that number, and it was like, okay, I'm going to give this a good go.
You stuck to plan, but you've eaten foods that you've enjoyed and you've been satisfied. Was that kind of a relief for you, a wake-up call, knowing that you can do this and lose weight?
Yeah, I think it was more of a shock than anything, that actually the way we eat is kind of determining how our bodies react to it and what results we get from those foods that we eat. So it was more of a learning curve all the way along. Those first few weeks, I think that I can eat these foods and they're going to help me lose weight and they're going to make me healthier, and I'm going to still be around when my kids are growing up and getting older. So it was it was a massive, huge relief. So yeah, it really was
brilliant. And did your success continue after those weeks, or were there any major blips along the way? Did you feel that you kind of got into the flow of it? Did the weight come off naturally, or was it a struggle? Because I know like the first week is fantastic, and I'd imagine that everybody in that group was like, oh my God, 12.5 pounds. It's, it's nearly a stone, isn't it? But how were the weeks after that?
I took to it like a kind of a duck to water in terms of how the plan worked and everything like that. And I think that first initial weight loss that I had that first week was what I needed to really stick to it. Going back to when I was with a specialist, he said I needed to lose a minimum of 6 stone in weight. So right. 6 stone was my initial target that I needed to lose. So I thought, if I've lost 12.5 pounds this first week, I'm going, if I continue with this, I can kind of get it off in a safe way where I'm still eating healthy, where I'm still, staying full. I'm not starving myself. I'm not doing anything drastically apart from eating the right stuff. So I carried on, and within my first 6 months of being a Slim World member, I lost my 6 stone. And that was, in that 6 months, I did not have a weight gain. I didn't have a maintain. It was losses each and every week. Some weeks were more than others, but most weeks was a steady loss every single week. So that's kind of how it happened.
That must have felt fantastic, and the change in your body and the change in your actual size. I mean, did it take you a while to get used to that difference?
Yeah, even these many years afterwards, I'm still getting used to the way I am now in regard to clothing, especially. First thing I do when I go out to shops to buy clothes is I go to the back of the rail. First thing I do, even though I know that the clothes that I need are further forward, so I don't need those bigger sizes anymore. But my head's tuned into the fact that this is what I need to do when I go. So those old habits that I had for a lifetime of when I was clothes shopping was automatically go to the back. I'm too big for any of those anyway, so I'm not going to look at those. Now it's a case of moving forward and finding those. So I'm still learning now and still getting, I suppose, into that mindset where and accepting the size that I am, I suppose, in the big way.
Along with the healthy eating, I understand that you took up running as well, which is, like, I feel like I'm saying this on every interview. people just, I don't know if it's a Slimming World thing or not, but people are really opening up to running. I know that obviously the park run's closed at the moment, but having been to park run for quite a number of years, I could see the numbers myself growing, and people seem to have taken a natural interest into running. What made you decide that this was a thing for you?
During the first 6 months that I lost that first 6 stone, I didn't incorporate any kind of exercise whatsoever. From the first day that I first started was horrendous. I hated every single second of it, even though I only running for kind of 60 seconds. But like I said, I finished that program within 9 weeks, and then within 12 weeks of me starting the Coach 5K, I thought, you know what, I'm going to test myself a little bit. I've just lost this weight. Again, I think I felt, that I could do anything now, that I'd lost this much weight. I could do anything I want to. I'm going to do something really out of my comfort zone. So I signed up for a 10K race. I'd only just finished running a 5K, which was hard work.
Wow.
So I thought, you know what, I'm going to push myself a little bit.
That is great to commit to a 10K so shortly after completing a 5K. That's off to you. And I know that some people will do a 10K and maybe walk for most of it and then go into the running when they feel able to do that. But having attended a 10K, didn't complete it at a fast time, but I know it can be quite intense. You get like the super fit, don't you, at the beginning. You get the people dressed up, you get the people that are just walking it or just maybe representing somebody. And I was told that don't worry about your speed because the crowd will carry you. Did you get the same sense when you did your 10K? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, my elder brother, he was he'd always been kind of the fit one of the family, that he'd always exercised, he'd always played football. You get one in every family, don't you?
Yeah.
And he was that one. So he'd done marathons, he'd run loads of things before, and he was kind of, don't worry about how fast you go, who's in front of you. Don't kind of, try and race anybody because that's not going to help you. Just do your own thing, enjoy it as much as you can, and try and get through the best you can. And even if you have to walk at some point, walk. So it was just a case of, I think, enjoying it and being out there and actually doing it. That was the biggest kind of thing for me.
Brilliant. So having, you've lost your weight, you've done the 5K, you've done the 10K, and that is such an amazing accomplishment. What I've always wanted to do with my podcast is just to be open. And sometimes things happen within our life that are unexpected and unforeseen and can lead us to a heavy heart. So if you just want to talk us through a little bit about what happened after that point.
Yeah, so probably, long after that, I went through some hardships in my life in regard to relationships. Wasn't very kind of, it was very, very, the word that I'm trying to find isn't there, but it wasn't a good time. I went into a very, very dark hole in regard to where I was with my life. Got to the point where I was considering suicide myself. And it was tough. It was really, really hard. I needed to find myself again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Feeling lost after being on this kind of like high and then dropping down to the point where you're having the suicidal thoughts. How did you cope with that? How did you cope with knowing that you'd found this happiness within running, within weight loss, and then being in the position where you was finding that you couldn't cope and the release for you was just to end it?
Yeah, it's really hard to look back because when I think of things now and the way I am now in regard to my own mental health, the way that I look at life itself, the way I look at my weight, the fitness that I do now, looking back to that point, it was like it's like an out of body experience that wasn't me at that time. I look back at it and think, that's obviously brought me to the point that I'm at now. But it was as if it wasn't happening to me, if that makes, maybe longer. Just looking at a person, just kind of existing rather than, living the life to how I've done up to that point. So, so that was tough to get through that time. It was a hard time, yeah.
Definitely. And did you find that in that moment that you was able to talk to people about how you felt? Did you feel that you had to isolate yourself because you didn't want to tell people how you felt, or did you feel that you was having to protect people by just keeping things to yourself, or was you in a position where you had support?
All the thoughts I was having, it was inside me, and I didn't want to let that out to anybody. I kept it all to myself for a very, very long time. Well, what seemed like a very long time. It might have been only a couple of months or so. But yeah, it was kept up inside, and I considered, this is my only way to kind of get out of this, to stop feeling like this, because I didn't want to feel like that anymore. So yeah, but I got to the point where I had to speak to somebody, a very close friend of mine. He messaged me that morning just saying, "Are you okay?" I think that message kind of exploded into, "No, I'm not okay, help me," kind of thing. Yeah. It was, and then 3 hours later in Starbucks talking, it was kind of, everything was out, and it was as if a massive relief had been taken off my shoulders, that I'd actually shared how I was feeling.
And it's lovely that you had that support for you in that moment, because I don't think a lot of people do. And it's nice as a guy you're able to talk openly about that. It's a privilege to be sat and obviously recording this for my podcast. There will be somebody at some point listening to this that probably has had a similar situation, or they've had similar feelings, or they don't really know what to do with it, or they might feel a bit alien when everyone's so positive. And I think it's only when you listen to other people who've gone through similar situations that we know that there's help out there, and your help came with your friend and that support, which is it's lovely to hear. So how was you in that moment? Did you turn to food as a comfort during that time? Because I'd imagine that I would. Did you find any comfort in food during that time?
It's very odd, because when you think of the history that I had in terms of my weight, it would be probably the first thing that anybody that kind of listening is thinking that's what I'd go to. But I went the complete opposite way. I didn't eat. It was very, very difficult to kind of process doing anything, rather than, the thought of actually getting up and making something to eat or going to a takeaway was just far too much for me to even consider. I'd rather just be kind of existing there, sat and wallowing, I suppose, is a word I'd use, rather than going up and kind of, because making something to eat or, getting something to eat was an effort which I couldn't process at the time. That makes sense?
Yeah, totally understand. And the fact that you I guess that you, at that time where you was in control, and then this thing happened, was it quite a quick shift for you to think, actually, I've come out of something there, I've moved it along from where I was feeling those dark thoughts, and now I'm going to get straight back on track? Or was it a long time for you to come out of those dark thoughts? Because let's not sugarcoat this. If you've experienced suicidal thoughts, and if your mental health has been so severe that you've had those thoughts, it can take a while. It can take help. It can take professional help or medication. There's lots of things that you may have needed to do just to get your life back on track. Never mind think about healthy eating.
You're completely right. When I had that conversation with my friend, I think that's going to help me to get through this time. So the first day and went down and just basically, again, like I had done with my friend, just completely broke down, and everything just spewed out of me basically about everything that was going on. He then cancelled his next appointments to kind of spend some time with me to talk about things, about what was going on, because obviously the thoughts that I'd had. And then we kind of carried on then for a couple, 2-3 weeks afterwards, looking at ways that he could help me in regards to what I was feeling. We talked about counselling, which later down the line, that's what I ended up doing. But one of the great things was he asked me if there was anything that I enjoyed doing. And the only thing that I could think of at that time was the only thing that I'd enjoyed over the kind of the recent times was the running that I'd been doing. And I hadn't done that for probably 12 months because of everything that happened. I'd kind of stopped and lost my way with it. And he said, well, why don't you put your trainers on and go for a run and see how you feel for that? Because again, obviously when I ran before, it was more of a case of I had a goal. This was my goal. It was to finish the 5K. Then I had a goal to finish the 10K. There was a goal. There was always a reason why. It was nothing other than I needed to get to that point. Now it completely flipped, and it was I'm going to be running now to make me feel better. And I suppose that escapism for, be it 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, that really helped me to kind of get balanced, I suppose, back in a way that, that's my escape for this amount of time. I'm not in the thoughts where I'm at. I'm in the thoughts of, this is really hard, or this is a great run. I'm really enjoying it. It was a really kind of really saving grace, I suppose, that I'd run previously, and that it was something that I could rely on to help me get through, what I was going through. So I went back to group, and I went on and lost a further 4 stone in weight due to kind of, probably partly the way I was feeling, and as well as kind of then incorporating the diet afterwards again. Running was helping me. Everything was coming together again, and I was getting back to some kind of normality, I suppose, in how I was.
What advice can you give to somebody who is in a similar situation where they don't really know how to start with their slimming because they feel dark inside?
I think the only advice there that I can give, that from my point of view, is talk to somebody. Open up to somebody close to you, open up to a stranger, open up to anybody you possibly can. With the amount of help that's out there now, with the likes of kind of Mind and the Samaritans and, everything like that, just seek help from somewhere. Once you've done that first initial contact with somebody, I think that's when we can then look at other avenues to really, progress with everything that we're doing. But yes, certainly, speak to somebody and make yourself little goals, daily, rather than kind of putting pressure on yourself that I've got to get out of this in this amount of time. Set yourself daily goals that I'm going to get through today. I'm going to have a great day. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to set myself those goals and just do that constantly. And before you know it, the days turn into weeks, or the weeks turn into months. And before you know it, you're feeling a lot better within yourself. It's a massive help. But talking is priority for me in regard to mental health.
Now that you've lost this weight and now that you're doing your running, you're no longer the unfit brother. So what does your brother think to all of this?
Well, it's funny because he had quite a bad injury from his running, and he stopped running and he started again. He started again about 9 months or so ago, and I kept saying, I'll come out with you and we'll do a run together while you're kind of, getting back to fitness and stuff. And he wouldn't come out with me because he knew that the pace that I was running at that point was a lot faster than what he was capable of doing.
Wow.
So we're kind of on a level par now, which is great.
It's nice to add that rivalry though after all those years, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's something I never really had or experienced, because it had always been, obviously with the weight loss, with starting to run and stuff, I'd always been competing against myself. So there was nobody there really to kind of match myself against, apart from strangers, but somebody I actually knew that, was doing the same thing. So yeah, it was really nice experience.
How can you describe the changes within you physically? Because obviously you had the weight that you're carrying around, and now you're so much slimmer and so much fitter. How do you feel as a guy having had those changes? What does it feel like to be you compared to how you was with your excess weight? I know you mentioned that you was happy before, but how do you feel physically?
Just, I suppose, I've got more strength inside me to accomplish anything. Personally thinking, there's nothing out there that we as humans aren't capable of doing. It's just having a little bit of belief in ourselves that we can actually do it. Yeah. And that took me a long time to get to that point where, I believe that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And that's where I'm at with kind of the accepting of where I am now with my fitness and my body shape and everything else. I can achieve anything that I want. If I set my mind to doing something, I know that I'll either do my best to accomplish it or I will absolutely smash it. And that's where I'm at, rather than having any negativity about it, the fact that I'm not going to be able to do this. I think mentally rather than physically, the change is huge. And it's finding that point. I think everybody gets to that point where, the mental side of things takes over. You know what? I can achieve this now. This is the goal I've set myself, and I'm going to achieve it.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of people that go to slimming groups, whether they go to slimming group or not, it's never really about the food, is it? It's never really about the food. And that's ironic, isn't it? It's ironic. It
really is. And like myself, I think a lot of people that do go to slimming groups, they're there for a reason, because over the years, habits have got in the way that, they've used it, like you said earlier on, food as a comfort. They've used it any situation. You're happy, you eat. You're sad, you eat. in between you eat, it's just that habit you get into, that cycle where you've got to break it really and learn new ways and new habits.
Definitely. So in total, what is your weight loss to date?
So in total, it's 11 stone, 11.5 pounds.
Wow, goodness. And that is such an achievement. It really is. It really is. And as a Slim and Will consultant, you must inspire a lot of people. Do you get more guys going to your group? I'm interested to know.
Yeah, it's been really good, to be fair. The guys' reaction to another bloke doing it as well has been really, it's been great to see the fact that, they've actually come to my group and they've all said that that's the reason why they've come, because it's a guy doing it. And the biggest thing that I've found as well is that the ladies that join as well, their husbands are coming along as well, because I think they've, the ladies have sold it to them as the fact that, it's a guy doing it. Why don't you come along and listen? So there's a lot of couples that I've got in my group as well, which is really great to see.
Oh, that's lovely. I took my husband, well, he was husband to be at the time before I got married. Yeah. He lost more weight than me. And I was like, no, you can go home, go back and sit on the sofa. Don't come here, show me up. But no, that is brilliant. I've loved listening to your story. Thank you so much for joining me today, Steve. It's been a pleasure. If you could give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't put any pressure on yourself. I think just take the pressure off you completely. Do the basics to everything you're doing, and those basics will give you the results you want. Just take the pressure away. Don't feel that you have to get to a certain point in a certain amount of time. Take it away and just enjoy what you're doing.
And this is just another example of how talking about mental health should never just be for one social media week of the year. You should always be talking about mental health. It should always be on the tip of your tongue. And it doesn't have to be as severe about talking to people that have suicidal thoughts. It could just be checking in with your friends, checking in with your family that you may have not seen for a long time, and just seeing how they are and having an open up conversation around, you know what, it's been a bit rough, hasn't it, around lockdown? How have you found it? And just getting that conversation started. And maybe the people that you do love, your friends and your family, maybe one of those people are really struggling. And if you listen to this and you don't have support, if you listen to this thinking, well, it's okay for Steve, he had a great friend there that was able to help, that I just want you to know that there is support out there. There's online support, there's your GP, there's places like Mind, and there's communities on Instagram. So please seek out the support. Please seek out that support, because it is there, and things have changed. Things are changing, but there's a lot more work to be done. And what a great episode from Steve. Having been in a really good, healthy mindset, he was able to lose a staggering amount of weight. 11 stone, 11.5 pounds. That is just, it is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it just amazes me, the guests that I get on. It really does. It just does. I mean, for a guy to sit there and talk about mental health the way that he has done, I'm just blown away by it all. Really am. Thank you so much for joining me again today. What I would ask is, wherever you listen to your podcast episodes, please hit subscribe. This would help me immensely with climbing the podcast charts. This episode is free. All the podcasts are free, but it does take a lot of time, especially as you'll hear within this episode. There's some glitches, some technical glitches, but hey ho, broadband, it wasn't on me, it wasn't on Steve. Broadband can do that sometimes, from time to time. Have a great week. Until next time, take care.